Steve Summer Saturday. One of the guests that's been making appearances throughout the day on the BBC stage here at Abbeyfield is Viv Newman, and she's been talking to people here about the role of women in the war. Now, when we think about wartime, not so much now, I know, with equality, many women serve with our forces today, but it wasn't the case, perhaps, back in World War One. More so in World War II, and it's taken many years for the women of World War II to get recognition for what they did. But as far as World War I's concerned, well, we know very little about what women did back in World War One. Certainly I don't, but Viv does. She's been researching this. In fact, she's written a whole book about it. Viv, you're enjoying your day here today and really educating and telling us about the importance of women way back then.
Oh, it's been fabulous. It's been a really interesting day. Lots going on and lots of interest in World War One. And from my point of view, lots of interest in women in World War One.
Now, we could probably spend the whole afternoon talking about the role of women, you know, back in World War One. But you're going to focus on just one element, aren't you, for us?
I am indeed. I'm going to tell you a story about a rather unusual Belgian woman by the name of Martha Knockaert. And the war actually came to Martha before it came to the British women, because Belgium was overrun by the German army before war was actually declared in the UK. And on August the 2nd, 1914, Martha's house in Westbrugge in Belgium was razed to the ground by the German army. She was a medical student studying medicine, and she was forced basically to become a nurse for the German army. And she worked in a town called Roulet, and she was recruited to become a spy for the British. So she was working in occupied Belgium, serving the German army as a nurse, and she became a spy. Obviously.
How dangerous was it for her?
That was extremely dangerous. I mean, most people know that Edith Cavell was executed for her spying activities, and the death penalty was passed on women just as much as on men if they were caught spying.
Was she an unusual character to be spying as a woman at that time?
She was fairly unusual, although who were spies, unbeknownst obviously to the Germans. But Martha was in a particular position because she was working very close to the German army in a hospital, and in fact she was decorated by the Germans. She received the Iron Cross for her devoted service to the German troops, and this would become very important a couple of years later. In 1915, Martha, who had originally loathed the Germans and everything Germany stood for, had become quite compassionate about the German soldiers and those who were wounded and those who she was nursing. But she still felt that her first loyalties were to the British and to the Allies, and so she was very closely involved in her spying activities. And one thing that she was asked to do was to report on troop movements in the town of Roulet, where she was nursing, because obviously if the British military authorities knew what troops were being moved through Belgium, they had an idea of what sort of regiments our own soldiers would be up against, and so she had to send detailed reports of who was passing through the station. And then one day it was decided that they would bomb the station at Roulet in order to prevent troop movements. And Martha was very involved with finding out exactly what troop trains would be passing through, getting this intelligence to the British Army, and indeed the station was bombed, leading to hundreds of deaths. And suddenly Martha realised that the people that she had been reporting on were people that she knew. And she has a very poignant moment in her memoir that she wrote, where she says that she lay on her bed and wept for the men that she had sent to their deaths, because even though they were the enemy, they were individual people who she knew.
Finally, what happened to her in the end?
She was caught. A trap was set for her. She walked into it. She was caught by the Germans. She was sentenced to death for being a spy, but the death sentence was not passed on her because she had received the German Iron Cross, and it was that Iron Cross that actually saved her life. After the war, she was mentioned in Haig's dispatches, and she received both Belgian and French medals for gallantry. I believe she is the only woman, perhaps one of the very few combatants, to have been decorated by both sides of the conflict.
If people want to know more about the role of women in World War One, can they find out more by reading your book?
They can indeed, or they can indeed look at my website, which is quite simply called www.firstworldwarwomen.co.uk, and I have a book coming out in November called We Also Served, The Forgotten Women of the First World War, and Marta's story and the story of hundreds of other women are detailed in the book.
If you want to hear those stories and you're coming along to Abbeyfield tomorrow, day 2 of the Colchester Military Tournament, you'll be on stage again tomorrow.
I will indeed.
With more of those stories.
Yes, and I look forward to seeing you again then and meeting anybody who wants to share women's stories with me.
Viv Newman, thank you very much indeed. BBC Essex at just after 3:30.